Of course, there's so many players throughout the day that we'll have to catch up in with feature, but we got to start talking about our first round here on day 2. This is going to be Tim Edwards going up against Teemu Mankinen, and honestly, love writing stories for players, and there's definitely a story here when we're looking at this team over on the right-hand side.
Honestly, just comparing these teams is awesome. We've got on Tim's side a very solid core of 6 Pokemon that are tried and tested, very consistent, always up there in those usage stats. However, on Teemu's side, there's a little bit of spice rolling through here. The cornerstone Ogerpon, I'm really surprised to see that. We've seen a lot of the Wellspring Mask and the Hearthflame Mask running around here at EUIC, but the cornerstone Ogerpon also has a Stame to play.
I mean, when I look at the rest of the team, I feel like I can't be surprised too much anymore when you see that Okidogi and a bunch of other things. But we'll talk about the little bit more typical team here, because this is also important to be touching on. And there is still a couple of really key choices here we have to go over. First off, the Urshifu Rapid Strike. A lot of times we might see a Choice Scarf, a Mystic Water, Focus Sash on this one. Maybe you see that a little bit more on the single style Urshifu, but this has the longevity. Make sure that you will not get one-hit KO'd.
The one thing I want to dive into as well is the Incineroar, because this is very much a supportive Incineroar Pokemon. It doesn't have any really powerful offensive moves like a Flare Blitz. It's running that Fake Out to be able to cause some flinches. It's got the Will-O-Wisp to bring the burns onto the field and the Parting Shot for that redirection, as well as Knockoff to get items away. But it's very much that supportive Pokemon.
Fluttermane as well, if we're looking at a typical Pokemon with different moves. Icy Wind is already one that gets kind of floated, maybe not always having it, but Taunt I think is the one I really want to be talking about. When you look at Teemu's team, there is definitely some Pokemon that you might want to be trying to set up a little bit here, or even a Moongus to kind of redirect or have some Spores. Fluttermane can shut that down, and notably well, since this isn't a Prankster Fluttermane to shut things down, maybe Teemu can get one setup with the Grimmsnarl, but is not going to be denied being shut down further on. The Fluttermane will get to furthermore stop Teemu in his tracks.
Yes, and Fluttermane's been a Pokemon that's been so well utilized in the season so far, but we haven't seen it too much on this EUIC stage. This is the team I want to dive a little bit more into, and the one Pokemon that looks kind of basic here is the Amoonguss. It's the one that we've seen a lot throughout yesterday, and it's doing its regular kind of stuff. The Ockerberry, a really nice addition to stop any of those powerful Fire-type moves that can come through, but if we take a look at Tim's side, that's really only going to be prevalent from the Ogerpon with something like an Ivy Cudgel. A closer dive into Pokemon like the Galarian Moltres with those choice specs as well shows what an offensive pressure it can be. Being that special attacker, it doesn't have to worry about any intimidates, any burns coming through from the Incineroar on Tim's side. It can just go for these powerful fiery wraths, do that double target damage, even try and get something like a flinch to slow down the pace on Tim's side.
The thing with the Galarian Moltres as well is it normally has a little bit of bulk here, and that can be further accentuated by this Grimmsnarl that can be setting up that reflect in that light screen. And Galarian Moltres, the ability, if you can hit it down to a low enough health, the Berserk will actually just make this such a force to be reckoned with. So you do have to be careful there, especially when there is the double redirection on the team. If one of these Pokemon gets set up like that Moltres, well then the Ogerpon Cornerstone or that Amoonguss can kind of draw those hits away. Okidogi as well. It sounds like not the most conventional pick, but actually on quite a few teams here at EUIC, 2 of them actually sitting at the 8-1 record, and that's not even counting the 7-2s.
Well, we saw a Pheasantipity yesterday and Okidogi today. That kind of combination is definitely coming through. One thing I want to talk about as well is the speed control options that Teemu has. But we'll talk about it later, Sierra. We're jumping into the action here. Okidogi and the Grimmsnarl for screen support is out for Teemu, whereas the Incineroar and the Urshifu, very powerful leads for Tim.
Yeah, at this point here, Guard Dog, that is going to be getting the attack boost coming out from the Intimidate from the Incineroar. So really nice ability here from the Okidogi. Not quite as strong as the Defiant, but being able to get that attack boost, sometimes you really do need the attack on the Okidogi. And with this really good range of attacks here, looking at Knockoff and Drain Punch and Gunk Shot, there is definitely a lot of ways that can threaten over on the other end.
The Gunk Shot makes things difficult for a potential Rillaboom or Fluttermane in the back. As things stand at the moment, Incineroar can go for that Fake Out, try and stop Grimmsnarl for getting one of those screens set up, maybe allowing the Urshifu to capitalize on that, go for those critical hits and just knock it out of the park.
Yeah, and that'll be the one thing here too, where you really have to see how much you value those screens when there is the pressure at Urshifu. You're starting off here, game 1, day 2 EUIC Terrestrialization. Water type over on the Urshifu, not surprising whatsoever from Tim.
Just gives it so much momentum and an extra power behind the punch to those water type moves, but it's going to be a sparkling surprise here on Saturday morning as the Okidogi is going to terrestrialize into that dragon type.
Great way to make sure that if there is going to be a Surge and Direct headed your way, that you're not going to be taking nearly as much damage as you want, because hey, you want to make sure you can take advantage where you can. We will see a light screen setup instead, making sure that you are set up for the special attacks potentially in the back. As Surging Strikes, you're not worried about the hit. It actually won't be targeting into that Okidogi, instead into this Grimmsnarl, doing a lot of damage. It might only be the one screen set up for the Grimmsnarl before it goes down.
I like that play, the Urshifu, yes, allowing the light screen to go up, but you don't have to worry about the potential reflect. There was no fake out coming through from this Incineroar, so it is now in prime position to go for one of its supporting moves. But first of all, the dodging of the gunk shot, really nice nimble footwork there from the Urshifu as the Will-O-Wisp will connect. Now that is something that is going to negate the physical pressure that Okidogi has.
And that's the thing. The fact that you don't see that fake out coming out and you can burn this Okidogi, it is going to be suppressed for the rest of the match. You have that one attack boost to try and counteract it a little bit, but that is a really tough blow. You've also spent your terrestrialization making sure that you're staying safe from an attack. There's not really too much of a way to avoid that Will-O-Wisp, but now you have so little damage output in comparison to where you would want. And when you're bringing out a supportive Pokemon like the Amoonguss too, you have to really wonder where you can start dealing the damage.
The Amoonguss is in a great spot though. There's no Flare Blitz on the Incineroar. It's not going to really worry about a knockoff or a Will-O-Wisp here. And at the same time, Urshifu going for the Surging Strikes isn't going to do too much damage. So Amoonguss in a very prime position to go for something like a Spore here. It could always go for the Rage Powder, try and maybe draw in attacks, protect Okidogi to maybe switch out and bring a more offensive Pokemon in. Because there's not a lot of damage output on Teemu's side. But strategically, if you put a Pokemon to sleep, that could put your foot back in the game.
Especially, too, if you can start setting up for a sweeper that you do have in the back. I have to assume it has to be something more on the offensive end, considering that you did already see something more passive in that Grimmsnarl. Drain Punch into the Incineroar, super effective, doesn't feel like it, but if you can start chipping away at it, that is going to be what you need to do to survive past this. Parting Shot, make sure they can be aided just even a little bit more and a chance for Tim to pivot.
The beef between cat versus dog is real here. The burn already connecting onto that Okidogi, and now the Parting Shot for good measure to really negate its pressure on the field, as well as enabling Tim the opportunity to bring this Cornerstone, this Ogerpon in. It is the Hearthflame Mask, however, so this is the one that can apply pressure to that opposing Amoonguss. However, it is running that Ochre Berry, so one of those Ivy Cudgels isn't going to do too much at first.
And this was also just a really, really good swap because Protect on the Urshifu, you know you can't get spored there, and Parting Shot into something that is a grass type like this Hearthflame Ogerpon means that even if the Spore is trying to go into that slot, that you're then going to be covered and you're going to be safe. And now with the Amoonguss being so heavily pressured and the Terrestrialization spent on the Okidogi, the Amoonguss isn't safe to be sitting here at all. And if you let it go down, you can then bring something in to try and deal some damage. But you haven't really made a dent on Tim's side of the board at all, so that Pokemon will surely just be dealt with handedly.
I think if you're Tim, you can completely ignore the Okidogi and just focus down onto that Amoonguss. Something like the Ivy Cudgel, maybe followed up by a Surging Strikes, could be enough to be able to get the knockout on that Amoonguss. You know it doesn't have any recovery berries, so if a double up is enough, then you can remove that threat very cleanly from the field.
Okidogi not wanting to get out of there, dog running away, tail between his legs. This Ogerpon's going to be joining the field instead. The Cornerstone Ogerpon we don't really get to see too often. Ivy Cudgel into the Amoonguss, but this is where we see that berry come in play. Still so much damage done, even after the Ochre Berry weakening that damage, but it won't be the double up. Instead, close combat into the Ogerpon. Because it's sturdy, it will endure the hit.
Really like that play by the Urshifu. Yes, it gets its defenses and special defenses dropped for good measure, but you do manage to put that Cornerstone into a precarious spot. The Spore does connect, though, onto that Urshifu, but in all honesty, with the speed of that Ogerpon, both Pokemon on Teemu's side are at threat.
That's the thing here, looking at this board state. When I look at Tim, even though there is a Pokemon that is asleep, you can still pressure with the Ogerpon, and the Ogerpon over the opposing end is 1 HP. The Amoonguss, it's not really that much either. Another Ivy Cudgel will follow that up, and you don't really have a damage option in the back. I feel like it's such a game of catch-up, and I don't really feel like there is any way to be catching up, considering we also know that Tim does have a 4th Pokemon in the back, which is the Fluttermane, which can go up and just absolutely destroy this board.
The Urshifu has a bit of wiggle room as well. It is holding that Focus Sash, so even if you do manage to attack into it with its drop defenses, you're going to have to hit it twice to be able to get the KO. Tim actually retreating it here.
Yeah, at this point, you could be playing safe, bring the Incineroar in, and just have a round of Intimidate to drop down the attack over onto that Ogerpon. Also going for a Spiky Shield. You can just make sure you might be ahead. You can't risk anything. Amoonguss will be the swap over Teemu as well, though, bringing that Okidogi back in.
I actually like this play. The Amoonguss can also use his Regenerator ability to get a little bit more HP on the board, as Tim plays quite defensively, making that switch in with the Intimidate, Incineroar, and then just the Spiky Shield. The Ivy Cudgel coming through into the opposing Ogerpon is going to give it... Oh, it's not actually a contact move, even though it looks like it is. I always get confused with that one, Sierra. Always blindsided.
It's because it uses the little stick thing to hit instead.
Stick is making contact, so no KO there for the Ogerpon. It can breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah, at this point too, you did bring the Incineroar in. You didn't, looking at Teemu, you didn't get to get that guard dog since your Mungus did swap out second. So the Okidogi, you don't have that +1 attack there, and the Okidogi really just not really threatening too much when you're looking on the other end of the board. Tim definitely wanting to make sure you're on stream, you want to make sure things are played out here, and then also just looking at things like the speed tiers.
The thing is, when you look at the Pokemon that Teemu has access to at the moment, Okidogo really debilitated with the attack drop it's getting from the burn. The Amoonguss can't really do a lot, and it's a ticking clock for that Cornerstone.
Something we haven't talked about, the upper hand. The speed tiers, if this, both at a +3 priority, but if the opponent is readying up a priority attack, you can actually suppress it and get the flinch instead. So that is how this Incineroar is going to be falling victim. And with that and the inability to go for the fake out onto the Ogerpon, critical hit from the Cornerstone will one-hit KO the Ogerpon on Tim's end.
Well, that answers my question about what Teemu can do to Tim's team at the moment. A lot of offensive threats on the field, but while Cornerstone Ogerpon is still in play, it can hit those rocks all day.
Yeah, you do have the Flutter Mane in the back still, and looking at this one, this is the booster energy, and when it has Icy Wind on its moveset, you have to imagine it will be the speed boosting Flutter. The Ogerpon with just the 1 health over on the opposing end, it only needs a tickle to be falling, and sure enough, the confirmation, speed booster Flutter.
This is what Tim really needs to start closing out the game. You can go for that Icy Wind. The Okidogi is a Dragon type now as well. It's going to take super effective damage from that, and a little bit of Ice will blow this Ogerpon over and get the knockout, as long as, of course, it's able to connect down. Flutter Mane then in prime position to be that speedier, more offensive Pokemon for the Amoonguss in the back. It can go for these Icy Winds again, or can even just go for that Taunt, shut down the Spore, and allow the other Pokemon to clean up.
The one thing here when you're looking at the moveset for the Flutter Mane, don't have that Dazzling Gleam with the Icy Wind being the only way to have something a spread damage attack here. So that's the one risk. When you have these coverage moves like this Icy Wind and the Taunt, you do need to be giving something up for it. And if there is a single target into the Ogerpon, well, it's spiking shielding. It wants to be getting past this turn unfazed. It will be the Icy Wind though. Hitting into the Protect won't do anything. And into the Dragon type Okidogi, that is just gonna be good for a little bit of chip. It will slow it down a little bit though.
The thing is, it will not affect that gunk shot. It does connect, and the defenses of the Flutter Mane are weak, but thanks to that burn, it's able to hang on. Will take a poison for its troubles, though, put a little bit of a timer on it, but Tim is in a prime position, start cleaning out this match, can go for the parting shot, really weaken this Okidogi once again.
Well, the one thing that where this gets awkward, you do still have that Sleeping Urshifu in the back. So with that, you can't actually parting shot to get that immediate pressure. And with that Dragon-type Terrestrialization, maybe this Okidogi isn't doing the most damage, but you might not be doing best back. If you could be preserving it past this Flutter Mane and not take a Moonblast, powerful one, into that slot, well then all of a sudden, it's kind of a little difficult to be hitting this Okidogi, at least in the immediate future. And since you can maybe go for something like this Follow Me here, make sure you can redirect it away, use that 1 health from this Cornerstone Ogerpon. After that poison, another hit with that Gunk Shot will take care of the Flutter Mane, which it would have been previously probably able to survive.
You're right, if Flutter Mane doesn't go for the Moonblast, another Icy Wind isn't taking out the Okidogi, and then it can, as you said, just easily clean up with the Gunk Shot. However, if Ogerpon's in a difficult spot, do you kind of switch it out, maybe try and preserve it for a little bit later on, try and let Okidogi deal with the Flutter Mane, or run that risk of that Moonblast? Urshifu, I think, needs to wake up. It has to still take its turn of sleep, and then it has the chance to be able to come through for Tim here and start closing up.
And that's the worst game to be playing, hoping the Pokemon wake up. Icy Wind spread damage will be enough to take care of this Ogerpon. Again, just the speed drop and the tiniest of chip for the Okidogi. It will be so slow now, and this Urshifu, we'll see if it could be waking up fast asleep.
Yes, Urshifu taking a timeout for this one, and now is once again the Gunk Shot. It does connect down onto that Flutter Mane. It is able to hang on, but that poison is going to tick away, and it is going to be enough to get the KO. Tim now going to be forced to bring the Incineroar back onto the field, and although it does have utility with things like the Fake Out, other than knockoff, it doesn't really have any offensive pressure on the field, and I don't know if that's going to be enough against something like the Amoonguss when it rejoins with the extra health it gets from Regenerator.
I feel like I definitely disrespected this board state that Teemu has built up for him at this point. Amoonguss is going to be coming back in, and of course, past that Regenerator would have gotten a bit of health back. Intimidate now is going to be activating Guard Dog on this Okidogi and give it a +1 to the attack. It hasn't been dealing the most attack, but it has been slowly and surely been dealing on through.
The thing is as well, Okidogi's HP is being dropped slowly a little bit with that burn, but Amoonguss now being on the field has the potential to go for something like the Pollen Path, heal that back up, and make it very difficult for Tim to find a way through this team. The issue is when that Urshifu wakes up, because Amoonguss can also provide that redirection support, draw in the attacks, and allow Okidogi to do its thing.
Urshifu, it will be the wake up this time around. Better late than never. Thank you for joining the party, Urshifu. Surging strikes now, fired into the Okidogi. You're doing so little damage, but you need to be hitting into this. This is the only way for Teemu to be getting any sort of hits, bringing it down to a sliver. But the Incineroar, even without the Flare Blitz, does still have the knockoff to try and deal with that final little amount, and it will be able to do so.
Exactly, and thanks to the Icy Winds previously, the Incineroar is going to be the faster in this end game and able to get the knockout. Now, little Amoonguss, I mean, it has been a Mighty Mushroom in the past, but this does seem to be a little bit of a formidable uphill for it to climb, particularly when its Pollen Puff was going into the side, and it will deal no damage in this turn.
Yeah, in case there wasn't the KO, in case the Urshifu didn't wake up at this point, being able to get that health back would have been absolutely everything. But at this point in the match, it is when you are having an Amoonguss on your team, you do have to understand sometimes the Pokemon will wake up a little sooner than you might like. The Urshifu had already gone through its nap and was ready to wake up and join. And that, I think, needs to be a really big adjustment and thought from Teemu in the second game, because I think that was the only thing that kind of kept him in it at that point, was the fact that there was that Spore, there was that Sleep, and the other Pokemon just kind of got dealt with.
And it did look like Teemu was down bad towards the end there, but actually the position wasn't as rickety as it first looked. Urshifu here able to get the nice, easy KO with Grimmsnarl at the beginning, but that light screen did pay off as the game played out. Things like the Icy Wind really doing not that much damage to the Dragon-type Okidogi, as well as maybe allowing something like the potential Moonblast to have still enabled the survival. This was a big turn for Tim, though. Getting the burn on that Okidogi just meant it was constantly on the back foot.
I just don't think the damage from the Icy Wind was the biggest thing when you're looking at the whole state of the match. You lost that Grimmsnarl right away, and you had a really, really then passive team. Having to swap the Ogerpon in and make it so it's down to 1 HP to eating the hit so you're not losing a Pokemon is really, really tough. So I'd like to see an adjustment coming out that you have a couple of different options, because you kind of were at mercy of the Urshifu over on Tim's end, and even when you suppress it, it's just when it wakes up.
This was a big swing of momentum, though, quite literally, as the Ivy Cudgel swung down, got the critical hit and the KO on that Ogerpon that was applying a lot of offensive pressure. This did, as you can see, make Tim have to really consider the Pokemon in the back and really hope that this Urshifu was able to wake up and hit through, get the knockouts in order to close out Game 1.
Yeah, so if you have something that can match up a little bit more into this Urshifu, that would be what I'd be looking for going into here. So we even talked about a couple of the different attacking Pokemon that are available. You do need to be positioning them well, but even something like the Moltres, I feel like could be doing a significant amount of damage to a couple of these different Pokemon coming out from Tim.
I was looking at the Moltres too. Something like the Air Slash could be really nice to get some damage on the board early doors into that Urshifu. However, if it does want to go for that Terra Water and drop its fighting type as well, then the damage isn't going to be quite as strong. The issue as well with Moltres is if it is going to have to take some big damage from something like a Terra Water Surging Strikes, that puts it in a difficult spot. The one good thing about that, however, is that the Berserk ability will be activated once that HP has been dwindled down, making Moltres in such a powerful position when stacked with those choice specs to deal big damage with like Fiery Wrath, for example.
Well, that's where we also have the double redirection on the team. Maybe the Cornerstone Ogerpon won't want to follow me past that, but the Amoonguss could. To start things off here, though, in this game number 2, Teemu is going to be sticking with the Okidogi and the Grimmsnarl. Guard Dog, once again, going to be activated to kick things off.
Same leads for Tim as well, the Urshifu and the Incineroar here. We didn't see the fake out from the Incineroar in that first game, instead trying to go straight away for that Will-O-Wisp, but I wonder if maybe shutting down something like the light screen could be optimal in this game too.
I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of the light screen coming out here. And with the Grimmsnarl, you have so much utility, but knowing that, hey, this 3 Surging Strikes can take care of it, you need to be so careful. When you're looking at the Flutter Mane, you know that there's a Flutter Mane in the back. I don't think that necessarily the Icy Wind did the most amount of damage, but you do have to be aware of the fact that there was the Moonblast that could have been fired off, and that is a very, very different story at this point. You also have to be so wary of your Okidogi, because you can't let it fall down the same fate with potentially getting Will-O-Wisp, so I like the swap coming out.
Yes, Okie dokie, hearing your words there and getting off the field before it can take a Will-O-Wisp. Amoonguss would be a much better target for this, isn't going to worry about taking a little bit of burn damage. And once again, our trainers opting for this early terrestrialization, just trying to get more offensive pressure on the board straight away, dropping that fighting type, turning into a pure water type to enable Surging Strikes to deal more damage.
You never want to waste the terrestrialization on the first turn, but when it's a Rapid Strike or Shifu into the water type, it never feels quite wasted. It will be the light screen here from the Grimmsnarl. Make sure the Flutter Mane in the back will be suppressed. The Surging Strikes coming out here will hit down into it. We saw last time that it was certainly enough for the 1-hit, 3-hit KO, however you like to consider these Surging Strikes. And going on in, not surprised to see it happen again.
Yeah, same old story playing out. Grimmsnarl out of here does give Teemu the option to bring something like the Okidogi back in, but it will have to forfeit the Guard Dog boost that it did get previously. Incineroar able to go for that Will-O-Wisp, but it will actually avoid the Amoonguss, but I feel like that's really neither this or that.
Hey, it's funny because it's like, maybe if I had kept it in, but no, this is 100% the safer play. Also, when you do get to bring something else in, you do have now the potential of the redirection here. Since it is the Citrus Berry over on Tim's end for this Incineroar, instead of something like a safety goggles, to make sure that, hey, this Amoonguss can actually match up into these Pokemon well. And bringing it on the field the same time as the Ogerpon as well. The Ogerpon definitely does get threatened by the Urshifu, but those hits redirected. All of a sudden, this Cornerstone Ogerpon with these Ivy Cudgels can actually do a lot of damage on the opposing end, and it also does have the coverage in the Power Whip to hit into the Urshifu.
That's a good observation, actually. I think Amoonguss definitely looks like the Pokemon to go for the redirection, allow Ogerpon to shine, but then if you're Tim, you have a decision to make. Do you switch a Pokemon out? Do you think it is going to be that Power Whip, or do you think it is going to be that Rock-type Ivy Cudgel? Because that's something that the Incineroar is going to find very difficult to deal with, particularly if it is going to get something like a cheeky critical hit again. Terrestrialization also coming out for Teemu here. It's going to be on that Cornerstone Ogerpon, so now it will become a pure Rock-type.
This is the craziest Ogerpon mask of them all. We barely get to see it. It does drop sturdy, though, in body aspect. That is going to be a boost to its defense going on forward. When you have the redirection, you can't afford to be dropping that, though, since all hits will be going towards the Amoonguss for this turn. And you're wanting that boost for your Ivy Cudgels. You have to imagine where this is targeting down. That Incineroar, not safe, and that will be a clean 1-hit KO.
He's fast, he's furious. Cornerstone Ogerpon gets a knockout here in this day 2 at EUIC. Urshifu able to go for these Surging Strikes, will be able to connect 3 times, but will be drawn into the Amoonguss. And I actually like the embody aspect change here, particularly when you think, hey, if for whatever reason I do have to take these Surging Strikes, my sturdy ability isn't even going to come into effect here at all. The one key thing, however, is Amoonguss is providing that amazing redirectional support so that the Ogerpon doesn't even have to worry about taking any potential Water-type moves.
And committing the Terrestrialization to get that boost to your Ivy Cudgels will actually be really, really strong here. If you assume that Tim had the same Pokemon that he had the first time around, well, you already saw how much damage that did into that Ogerpon. You can just imagine the Flutter Mane is going to be crumpling to that. And you have such a speedy and strong Pokemon. And we already got to see that the Surging Strikes, they never really do too much to an Amoonguss. And you're forced to be bringing something in here. Of course, you do have the potential of Protect to just try and make sure you have another turn of hitting into the Ogerpon. But then also you have to be worried of the fact that if you read into the Protect, you could also just get Power Whipped.
Tim has to get rid of this Amoonguss, and you can see him considering which Pokemon to bring in, but I think you're forced to bring in the Ivy Cudgeling Ogerpon here. It's really the only Pokemon on that bench that has the capability to deal with this Amoonguss. It's already had a lot of damage taken by the Surging Strikes, and if I remember correctly, the Ivy Cudgel, even with the Occa Berry, will now be enough to be able to get the KO. But Amoonguss could always go for a really interesting spot here, go for that Protect, maybe even switch out, bring something like the Okidogi in, and just then cause more trouble later down the line.
That's a tough one. It would be nice because you get that regenerator boost to make sure you have the longevity, but it also does then leave this Ogerpon really, really exposed. And when you're staring down an Unseen Fist or Shifu, that would certainly just, I don't care about you, Ogerpon, and just take care of it. I think that you have to be really, really careful of that. And you can't actually really force it out unless you're making a really, really hard call.
On the Ogerpon side, there is the Spiky Shield, so possibly it could be a case of just trying to bring that Spiky Shield into effect. But Amoonguss actually being the brave little soldier that it is, going for this redirection, drawing in the Ivy Cudgel. But first of all, the Ogerpon on Teemu's side is going to be the faster. It can go straight down into the Ogerpon with a 1-hit KO. There's no stopping this Cornerstone.
Twice it's gone through, twice it's 1-hit KO'd. It's Ogerpon Brethren. Now Surging Strikes into the Amoonguss. Certainly if you had both of the Pokemon on Tim's end being able to target into it, you could get rid of this Mushroom. But only having to survive a barrage of hits from this Urshifu yet again, it'll survive through the turn. Now Tim down to his final 2 Pokemon.
Honestly, that speed interaction was not something I was expecting. You might stereotypically look at a bunch of rocks and think you're going to be kind of slow and steady, but actually it had the nimbleness to be able to outspeed the Ogerpon on Tim's side. Now that Flutter Mane comes into effect, but you got to remember light screen's still up, and there's not a lot, even though it's speedy, that it can realistically do. Ogerpon is just a wall right now.
Amoonguss did survive through the turn, but when you do have this icy win, if you connect, if you can get rid of the Amoonguss on this turn, and then go for the surging strikes and be faster than this Ogerpon. You can slow down its speed and be able to take care of it and just get a 2-for-1 combo here on this turn. The Icy Wind isn't necessarily the most reliable, but if you can get that double connect, it could pay off in gold.
High risk, high reward, and that's what Flutter Mane is here to do. I think that's a great observation, making sure that the speed effect comes into effect straight away, enabling the surging strikes to come through from that Urshifu. And it's not like you can spike your shield away from it. That Unseen Fist ability will be able to break through any barrier. Flutter Mane does go for the Icy Wind. Of course, it connects into the protect of the Amoonguss, and it does connect onto that cornerstone.
Yep, bringing that speed down one stage, trying to make sure that you can outspeed on this next turn, and the Urshifu will. Surging strikes fired off into the cornerstone Ogerpon. That is already so much damage for one. Will take the 2 hits to be KOing it, but that is a huge threat on Teemu's end, eliminated.
Yeah, Urshifu is really unstoppable, not put to sleep in this game, and once again able to get around the plans that Amoonguss was trying to foil for it. Now things look a little bit difficult for Teemu. Is going to be forced to bring that the Okidogi in from the back here.
At this point, too, the Okidogi is a lot better positioned in the fact that you haven't had it burnt and you can be doing some damage, but it's still a really dangerous situation when you're looking at how little damage has been done to Tim's final 2 Pokemon. And already with that Poison Jab, not necessarily the most accurate of moves, and sure, you have some defenses, but the Surging Strikes is going to be doing a lot of damage. So as much as, hey, this Okidogi is set up better than it was in that first game, it's still just not set up in a spot that it can really be popping off like you need it to.
I am interested, though, to see how much damage the Gunk Shot will do without the burn. Amoonguss trying to go for the double protect here fails as Flutter Mane goes for that Moonblast, not wanting to risk the Mist of an Icy Wind, and able to get the knockout on Amoonguss, leaving just the dog facing down, backed up into the corner against Lee's last 2 remaining Pokemon on Tim's side. The Surging Strikes will come through. Is this going to be enough for a KO, though? That is the question.
Won't be enough this time, but the double up and the hit from the Moonblast next turn is certainly could be if you can't get rid of it. And even then, the Urshifu would. Going for the double, definitely risky. But if you could be taking the KO and then redirect that final turn, possibility, and just stealing it right then. It was already impossible, but the Gunk Shot missing on top of that all. Now you can just double hit into this poor lonely dog, and the battle's done.
I just wanted to know how much damage it would do, and we're not even going to find out. Flutter Mane just saying, nope, not taking any damage. I'm going to get my rest in. It's going to be a long day 2. And congratulations to Tim being able to take the first set of day 2.
Looking at both of these trainers, and Tim as well, when we're looking at their past, I feel like this is a pretty big breakout performance. Of course, Tim managing to make his way into top 32 at Toronto, but when you're looking at something like this international stage, you're playing literally on that international stage. You're now at 9-1 in the competition. This is definitely such a great showing and really proving the travel over here is worth it.
Yeah, Tim was actually undefeated yesterday right up until the final round, losing to Victor Medina, who then went through as one of only 2 undefeated players. So an incredibly consistent run yesterday. Clearly has a lot of confidence in the team and showcased it to perfection for us on the broadcast.
Definitely scary when you go up against something that's as unorthodox as Teemu's team. I'm sure he's like, I didn't play anything like this yesterday, but really, when we're talking about strong Pokemon, there's a reason that the top Pokemon are the top Pokemon. The Urshifu, the Rapid Style, just doing so much damage. It was always so safe for the Terastallization with the damage output you had, and it matched up so well into all of Teemu's team.
And I have to credit Teemu and this Cornerstone Ogerpon, because I think it comes out onto the field, you know, everyone kind of gives it a little bit of stick, and it comes out kind of saying, you know, who's afraid of little old me, and then it absolutely bobs you with that Ivy Cudgel, and it's like, okay, yeah, I am. I'm scared. I don't want to come down against this Pokemon, and seeing the Terastallization actually came into effect showed that it is a very valuable component on Teemu's team. It's not just there to try and, you know, give a little bit of flame for the Ogerpon fans. It's actually there for a valuable reason.
It definitely is. It's just, it's hard for Pokemon like that to exist when, you know, one of the top Pokemon in the meta is that Urshifu Rapid Strike, but being able to see the amount of damage that it was doing and how well it stacked up, even into something like that Heartflame Ogerpon, was really, really incredible to see.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of sin as underestimating it in the past, but I will not be doing that going forward. I have to say, though, I think the consistency, the tried and tested 6 that Tim has is what's going to be emerging as kind of, I suppose, my prediction for what we're going to see in the day 2 action.
Well, I definitely want to know what Tim is thinking and what he's expecting going on further in day 2. And Charlie has him over on the stage for our interview.
What a way to kick off day 2 here at EUIC. Congratulations to you, Tim,
Thank you.
on that victory. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Started off 8-0 yesterday, and to start off day 2 with a win, it feels really good.
Yeah, keep up that momentum. So, that was Cats versus Dogs. It was the Incineroar that came out, triumphed in the end over the Okidogi on the other side, making a bit of a hot dog with that Will-O-Wisp as well. Talk us through that game 1.
Yeah, with Grimmsnarl, having Urshifu to not only crit through the screens, but get rid of Grimmsnarl turn 1, not let them get both screens up was really big. There were a couple situations where clearly we had a speed tie going on with the Ogre Ponds where took the risk there, but I knew if I had Fluttermane in the back with Icy Wind, Urshifu would be able to clean up the end game against the Cornerstone.
Sure, and then in game 2, it seemed like you were nearly caught between a rock and a hard place there with that Ogre-Pond Cornerstone. Big Ivy Cudgels taking out the Incineroar, also your own Ogre-Pond Half-Flame Mask, but you were still able to clinch victory in the end. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, sure. I think ultimately I knew that as long as I had the Fluttermane speed control in the back, the Cornerstone would always be super threatened by the Urshifu. And the Okidogi switching out early on in that game 2 got rid of the guard dog boost, so even though I didn't get the burn on, it was a little bit less of a threat for that reason too.
Sure, and your Urshifu was really living life in 3D, just coming through the screen of that light screen that the Grimmsnarl was setting up there. Well, you must be feeling on top of the world, and how is your season going?
Yeah, I came into this tournament at about 340 championship points. Need 500 to qualify in the States, so this is going to get me most of the way, if not more so. But I want a strong finish today. I'm not satisfied with what I have so far.
No, of course, but it seems like you're staying calm and collected. Looks like you've got a good mental attitude heading into the rest of the day, so that is fantastic to
Thank
see.
you.
Now, Tim, tell us, Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle?
Growing up, it was a different answer, but in adulthood, I've matured, and I'm a Bulbasaur guy now.
Bulbasaur guy. Okay, we've got some cheers from the crowd for that one as well. I got to tell you, Bulbasaur is currently on 5 points in the winners' interviews. Charmander has 4 votes, and Squirtle only has 1.
Oh, wow.
So
I'm
we'll
surprised.
see how that shakes out. I know, so am I.
thought I was in the minority there.
But fantastic to hear from you, Tim. Any shout-outs you want to give?
Got to give a shout out to Dakota. We ran the same team this weekend. My first friend in the community, and he's been a great supporter all weekend. A big shout out to Fede Campo. He's my coach and helped me a lot preparing for this tournament and building the team. So many friends have reached out to me from back home, plenty in the crowd today. It feels really good to have the support.
Thrilled to hear that. Everyone has their role to play. Well, here we are. We've kicked off EUIC Day 2, and now, Sierra and Lou, back to you.